The Cincinnati Bengals are talking about explosive plays and changes coming to the way they're playing football. Let's talk with Dan Hoard about how those things are being implemented in the offseason program.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm Jake Liscow. He's Joe Goodberry. Today we are once again joined by the great, the Unison Dan Hoard. Unison is not the word that I wanted there, but it's close enough. The inimitable, is that the word I want?
I don't know, but I've invented words that don't exist on some of my broadcasts, so I'm right there with you. After the Bengals beat Baltimore, the Tyler Boyd catch that sent the Buffalo Bills to the playoffs, I invented a word that combined two words. I took two words and combined them into one. So it's this very famous moment in Bengals history, and my call of it includes a word that doesn't exist. So, Jake, you're off the hook. It happens to all of us.
Well, that's how we get words into the dictionary time and time again. Today, we're going to discuss a little bit more of the on-field aspects of the offseason program. There's been a big emphasis, Dan, on explosive plays, on getting under center, on play action. There's been a lot of talk about the linebackers. We'll get to that topic a little bit later in the show, but let's start with the play action topic, because it feels like every year I see Joe at training camp, or I'm texting Joe during training camp. Man, the Bengals are going under center a lot in training camp. They're repping play action a lot in the offseason program. And inevitably every year when things start to be real during the regular season, especially after that scripted drive, we see the Bengals go to where they're comfortable, which is Joe Burrow in the shotgun, putting receivers into the pattern and letting Joe Burrow pick apart defenses. Do you buy that this year, the way Dan Pitcher's talking about it, the way Burrow's talking about it, it's been discussed at press conferences, that this year they're really prioritizing that part of the playbook differently than we've seen the last few years?
I think they would like to use it more, but I still don't think that's going to be the dominant part of their personality. I think one of the underrated things about their coaching continuity is that they're able to work on things that they're not good at, maybe more than they would if they didn't have this continuity. The stuff that they do well, that's already clicking. I mean, they don't have to build that from stage one. They're jumping right in at, an advanced level when they do Burrow from the shotgun, 5 guys going out in patterns. They do that well. They pick right up on that. So with that continuity, they can spend more time working at the things that they're not very good at, including more of the under center stuff. So I do think they would like it to be more of a weapon. And I think they would like it to be something that they can lean on against certain opponents. When I think back to Bengals games in recent years, and you'd have to go back and look up the numbers for this to know if I'm right, because I haven't double checked, but it feels to me that one of their best wins over the last several years was the road win in San Francisco in 2023. Oh, yeah. And it felt like in that game, they leaned on it more, and it was very successful. And I think that's what they would like to be able to do against certain opponents that are going to play them certain ways. They would like to have that card as something that they can play and know that they can do it well. So I would anticipate in training camp, they're going to continue spending a lot of time on this in hopes of operating it more efficiently than they've been able to in the past.
What a treat that the offense is so good and these guys have been together for so long, not just the players, but the coaches as well, that they can sharpen the weakest tool that they have, right? And try to get it to work. And if not, mid-game, they could go and lean on what they've done for the last 6 years and feel okay with it. And guys would remember what they ran 4 or 5 years ago. So I'm with you. I'm taking a wait and see approach to see if that's really going to be something they can lean on rather than just use as a bad changeup once in a while. Another thing I'm waiting to see is, and I'm expecting at this point, Dan, is the DJ Turner extension. It feels like, and it seems like they really like the way he has blossomed, not only on the field. I think he's made progress on film, and all the data the last 2 years for him have been an upward trajectory. but also as a player, and the way they've talked about how much he's grown as a player, the mental approach he's taken to the game, how he's turning into a leader. What do you see up close? And does it also feel that way, like this is a priority extension for them this offseason?
I think it's coming. There was a cryptic social media post by his agent that DJ amplified that kind of implied it might be coming sometime soon. I hope that's the case. I know they would like to re-sign him. I think that was part of the reason why they restructured Joe's contract when they did, to give them some more space right now to get a deal done with DJ. So I feel like it's coming. And I agree, it's not just how well that he played last year, but it's how his whole personality changed. I did an interview with Al Golden fairly recently and asked him something along the lines of, was this one of the most dramatic season-long improvements that you've ever seen? And he said, yes, but even beyond that, it was like from week 1 to week 4, suddenly he was this guy. So it's hard to find a corner that good. You've got one that you drafted and developed. Those are the guys you're supposed to try to re-sign whenever you can, and they've got the space to do it. So I do expect that to happen.
Getting a player extended on the defensive side of the ball should be more commonplace than it has been for the Bengals. Having a success story in DJ Turner is a step in the right direction, assuming that gets done. As you watched him blossom into that role that Al Golden talked about, and make sure you're checking out Dan's work on the Bengals Booth podcast, a fantastic podcast in its own right. He's with us today here. Joe's been with him there, and Dan does great work there. But as you've watched DJ Turner grow, what were the first signs to you as someone who is covering the team so closely that something started to click for him along his path as an NFL player?
I think just the confidence, the change in his confidence last year was so noticeable. And I'm not sure what happened first. Did he somehow develop some internal confidence and then it carried over to the field? Or was he having success and therefore became more confident in his overall, personality? But the confidence shift was really noticeable. And he's been very vocal about how he's changed his personal routine. He's embraced, meditating on a daily basis, and he takes it really seriously. He's traveled all over the world in search of, better techniques to do that kind of stuff. So it's helped him immensely. Other guys on the team have started doing similar things because they've seen the effect that it's had on DJ. When Zac Taylor talked about his number change to the number 0 and how, Zac historically has kind of been reluctant to give defensive players these single-digit numbers because that has not been part of the Bengals' history. But he gave in DJ's case. And one of the reasons why is just because of the overall person that he's become. I think his exact words were, he's everything that we want of our players in this building. So all of that to me points to a contract extension. And in answering your question, I do think confidence and just the visible kind of way he's carrying himself right now is so much different from his first couple of years.
The biggest stage in world soccer is here, and every match feels like it has the potential for a memorable moment. One goal can completely change the energy of a game, shift momentum, and alter the outcome in an instant. That's what makes tournament soccer so exciting, from the opening whistle until the final kick. Now, FanDuel is giving fans another reason to stay locked into every match with every goal pays. Bet on a match and get bonus bets for every goal scored in that match. More goals means more bonus bets. All you have to do is turn in your token. We're on to the next round, and this is when it gets really exciting and really fun, right? You got teams and national teams and fans of their countries looking at these games and watching these games, and the excitement in the stadium is unmatched, and all it takes is one goal to change everything. And now you get the benefit from that goal. From the opening whistle to the final kick, let there be goals on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com to get started now. We are with University of Cincinnati Athletics Hall of Famer Dan Hoard. Dan, you're in a lot of different Hall of Fames now. We're getting a lot of awards on the wall or on that mantle somewhere in that house, I'm sure of. Dan, I like to get nostalgic. You started with the Bengals in 2011, if the internet is correct. And this first year, we got our first taste of like the Marvin Lewis era, that back half Marvin Lewis era Ring of Honor candidates in the form of Andrew Whitworth, AJ Greene, Geno Atkins. Some of the players that when I was a younger man, I really thought those were like the pinnacle of what Bengals football was for that, that second half of the Marvin Lewis era. What do you remember of those three guys? If people are putting those votes in for those three, what would you say like is a moment maybe sticks out for each one of them?
Well, let's start with AJ Greene. So when the Bengals hired me in 2011, I think they hired me in May. I was broadcasting for the Pawtucket Red Sox AAA baseball team, the Red Sox top farm club at that time. And since it was May, I didn't want to leave the team in the lurch, in the middle of the season looking for a new announcer. So I explained to my boss that I was going to be taking the Bengals job at the end of the season and that I would have to miss a few Pawtucket games for the preseason games. But other than that, I would do everything I could possibly do to finish out the minor league season. So as a result, I was not at training camp. I was doing my homework from afar. So the Bengals draft AJ Greene. I'm, reading up about AJ and watching highlights from Georgia and so forth, but I hadn't met him. So the first Bengals preseason game with me broadcasting was a road game in Detroit. They lost 34-3 in 2011, but I flew from Providence, Rhode Island, which is close to Pawtucket, Rhode Island, to Cincinnati, and then traveled with the team on the team plane to Detroit. So I'm standing outside the buses, getting ready to go to the Cincinnati airport, and I see AJ Greene. So I figured, all right, I'm not at training camp. I'm not going to be in the locker room until the season begins. At least this gives me an opportunity to walk up to AJ, explain that I'm the radio announcer. You're going to be, dealing with my questions, whatever I normally say when I'm breaking the ice with these guys. So I went up, we made a little small talk. And then because I had not looked it up, I said, by the way, what does AJ stand for? And he said, Adriel Jeremiah Greene. And I heard that in my brain and I thought, my God, that sounds biblical to me. I've got to use that. And obviously I did while he was with the Bengals. So that was the genesis of the whole Adriel Jeremiah Greene thing. Geno Atkins, to me, would be my first pick for the Ring of Honor. I know that wasn't specifically your question, but since those guys are on the ballot now, I would put Geno at the top of that list. He's been to more Pro Bowls than any other defensive player in franchise history. To this point, right up there with Tim Krumrie as the most dominant defensive tackle in franchise history. Tremendous player. I wish he had talked to the media more. I hope that doesn't hurt his ability to get to Canton someday. It shouldn't have an impact, but sometimes it does. Very early in my Bengals broadcasting career, part of what I do for the team would be radio shows during the course of the week. We do a 2-hour show every Wednesday and a 3-hour show every Friday. And we often have current players join us on those shows. And I think it was my first year, Geno came out and did a 3-hour show. Well, I take that back. The show's 3 hours. The player only comes on for 1. But he came on and did a 1-hour show, and he was great. And I don't know why he stopped doing that. I think in his own mind, he doesn't think he's good at interviews, but he's fine. After he signed his last contract extension with the Bengals, he did a news conference, and he was great. So I wish he did that stuff more often. But in any case, I loved watching him play. I used to love Lap's reaction to the first snap of the game when the Bengals were on defense, because inevitably Geno would take whoever was blocking him on that first snap, especially if it was someone that he had never faced before, and just drive them back several yards. You just knew it was the beginning of a miserable day for that offensive line.
Setting the tone, right?
Setting the tone. And, Lap's reaction to that was always great. So that's what I think of with Geno. And then with Andrew Whitworth, in my 15 years as the announcer, he's the best leader they've ever had. He might be the best leader in franchise history. He is going to the Pro Football Hall of Fame someday. His career ended on such a great note with the Super Bowl championship and the NFL Man of the Year award. So Whit was awesome. I'm sorry he didn't get to spend his entire career in Cincinnati. I think that would have been great. But he'll certainly be in the Bengals Ring of Honor someday. I guess if I were placing my vote on those three, I would go Geno first, AJ second, Whit third. But I wouldn't object to anybody that mixed that order up however they saw fit.
Three more than deserving candidates for the Ring of Honor. Dan, let's talk a little bit more about some of the things that might be happening with this team on the field in 2026. I want to talk about the tight end position. This goes back to our initial topic around play action and getting under center. There's a feel-good story brewing with Eric All. I'm excited to see Jack Hendry's future. They have entrenched veterans in Drew Sample and Mike Gesicki. This group suddenly, while they're not necessarily top-heavy, there's no Brock Bowers in this group. There are a number of very capable players at the role they have, and there was that significant transformation when Eric Hall was part of this offense. It really leaned on what Eric Hall could do for the offense. How is that tight end group coming together in your eyes from what you've seen from this team throughout the offseason?
I think it's a Swiss Army knife. They've got a little bit of everything in the group. And let's not forget Tanner Hudson. Tanner's been quietly very productive when given the opportunity. Joe Burrow likes throwing to him. I would probably have Tanner listed above Jack Hendry's at this point, just based on his track record to this time with the Bengals. But Eric All is the wild card, right? I mean, he's the most violent blocking non-offensive lineman I've ever seen in a Bengals uniform. I mean, going back to before I was the announcer, maybe there was somebody else like that. There probably was. But during my 15 years, I've never seen anybody come on the field and immediately change the tone the way that Eric All did in the first half of the season 2 years ago. The guy lives to punish people. That's what he enjoys doing. The way that coaches and teammates speak about, his violent approach to the game is unlike anything I've ever heard about anybody else. So I'm taking it with just a slight grain of salt, just to not get my hopes up too high, just because of, the serious repair of the knee that he went through. The story is incredible. I mean, the job that they did at Iowa didn't work. I'm sure their doctors are competent, but for whatever reason, it just didn't work in his case. So basically, they had to undo a surgery, let that heal, and then do another surgery. And I don't know if any athlete or any NFL player has undergone that and made a total recovery. So I'm going to be a little bit cautious in how I feel about Eric All at this point. But everything so far looks good. He says he feels better than he's felt in many years, better than he felt at the end of his college career, better than he felt 2 years ago in his rookie year. So I'll take him at his word. I know the Bengals are hopeful that he can be that guy again. And if he is a big difference maker. They play differently when they have him at their disposal than they do when he's unavailable to play.
Yeah, no doubt. And we talked about the DJ Turner development into year 3. Hopefully Eric All has that year 3 that, would be awesome for his career and just for the comeback he's experiencing. Another one, a big one, and a big sign that they probably got offensive line fixed or on the right track, definitely. Amarius Mims, their first-round pick, going into year 3 now. To me, it's funny to talk about Eric All and then Mims, because two opposite ends of the way you watch him on tape sometimes, because All is trying to run through people, and Mims is sort of a gentle giant out there. He gets the job done, but he's not the most aggressive or physical person. When you hear him talk, he sounds very pleasant and nice in these interviews, and I'm like, it just doesn't match with how huge he is. But man, did we see the progression last year into what is a hopeful year 3 for Mims. Have you seen him? What's his personality like when you talk to him in the locker room? And have you seen that slight change? Because I think towards the end of the last year, he started to get a little bit more aggressive than we saw in past Mims highlights.
Yeah, it totally makes sense, right? Because of how little he played at Georgia. That was the big story going into the draft. And I think that that applies to the way that he's played in the NFL. He was very raw as a rookie. He gradually got better and better. And now we're seeing the evolution to the point where he's going to be a Pro Bowler at some point. You know, the Pro Bowl is unfortunately weighed heavily toward veterans with reputations. Sometimes they get into about 2 more Pro Bowls late in their career than they deserve. So it might take Amarius a few more years to get there, but then that's going to apply to him. And maybe he'll go to more than he deserves late in his career. But I think he's tracking in that direction. The thing that stands out to me is that he just makes it look so easy. I've never seen a tackle just like dominate so easily. It's so natural for him with his size and his feet and all of it. I think when coaches look back at his tape, they often chuckle just that he's facing these elite pass rushers and he seemingly is just, casually dominating. So, yeah, I think he can continue to play with a little bit more of an edge and probably will, but I do love his progression through 2 years.
Really seen the offensive line gel with Scott Peters, with Dalton Reiser in the lineup beside Amarius Mims, Dylan Fairchild's progression as a rookie as well. And speaking of guys that are going into their second years, like Dylan Fairchild, who this team is really relying on, switching over to the defensive side of the ball here, there's a lot on the plate of Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter. And they've talked this offseason about how much better they feel going into the season, how much more confident they feel, how much more they feel they have their feet under them as we've gotten through the offseason. What's the difference to you in those two guys? What's your confidence level as you've heard the way that they're carrying themselves this offseason?
Well, the biggest thing that you could see at OTAs and minicamp was how much more communicating they were doing. Now, part of that was Barrett Carter was on the field with the ones all of the time. And he's the guy that's got the green dot, so he has to do a lot of the communicating. But you just see so much more. It's so easy to detect. They're pointing, they're talking, they're moving. And as rookies last year, at this point at least, their heads were spinning as they tried to grasp what Al Golden was looking for out of them on defense. I asked Al specifically, do you see a big difference in the way that they're communicating on the field? And the word that he used was unequivocally. So that's, it's a good word. it's a good show off of his vocabulary, but it applies. It's so obvious in watching them. So I think that that's going to be a big difference. And then I just think that the front is going to be so much better that is probably the biggest reason why they are going to be better. When the guys up front are controlling the offensive line a lot better than they've been able to do the last few years, the linebackers by extension are going to have fewer guys blocking them or guys not getting to them as quickly. They'll be able to see things better, get to things more quickly, and play better. So I don't know what the ceiling is, but I think the floor is definitely raised for those two guys based on having a year of experience and based on having better players in front of them.
You've got a few things going on there, right? You've got the talent infusion on the defensive line. You've got a year 2 jump expected from the linebackers. You have year 2 of Al Golden feeling more comfortable with his personnel and what he can do with them and how they're responding to coaching. And the hope then is that all comes together and elevates the entire side of the defense where, yeah, there's a talent infusion, sure, but there's also the experience and the development. And that's part of why they brought Al Golden in.
Yeah, and I learned from Joe actually on a podcast where he appeared on my podcast that you had done the research for how linebackers improve from year 1 to year 2 based on PFF data more than players at any other position. And I think that's going to apply to them. I do think linebacker is a uniquely tough position to play as a rookie. And I think they took their lumps and it was noticeable. But I also think if you track the data for those two guys last year, over the last 6 or 7 games, they skyrocketed and got much better. So hopefully they start at that point this year and continue to get better.
Dan, let me speak for a lot of fans on social media that really are hanging sometimes at the end of practice and waiting for your observations and your threads and your videos that are different angles than everybody else. You must get the VIP access for some of these, and your videos
not
and your
just
takes.
fans, not just fans, Joe. Sometimes we're waiting for them before we do our podcast too.
100%. We'll let's wait till Dan puts his out and then we'll go for it. But what's fun about camp is the narrative that usually starts, or the storyline of a player that lights the summer on fire, right? And you're like waiting to see this guy, whether it was Mitch Tinsley last year in preseason, start to make plays and make these catches. I want you to call out right now, maybe call your shot. Who do you think that might be? Someone, so we're talking bottom of the roster. Maybe he makes a few plays. Maybe it's a crazy catch or comes up with an interception. Who could you see being that guy before we get there?
Well, my guy probably doesn't have much of a chance to be on the roster because of the position group, but my guy is Dante Myers, the CFL wide receiver. So I spent a lot of time at OTAs and mini camps looking at the guys at the back of the roster to find that Mitch Tinsley. And I don't mean another wide receiver, but that guy that we're not even thinking of that winds up being a factor. It's wide receiver. It's potentially return man, but Charlie Jones has 3, return touchdowns in his NFL career. So he's a strength. He's not a weakness if he's healthy. So I don't know if Dante will get his chance just because of the group. I imagine he'll have a decent shot at being on the practice squad, but he's been impressive to me. His feet are lightning fast. I've watched him, fielding punts. He seems to catch them pretty well. His CFL stats were excellent over the last year and a half. So of the bottom of the roster guys that jumped out to me, Dante Myers is at the top of the list. Unfortunately, I picked a guy in a position group where I don't know that he's going to get much of a chance, but hey, you never know.
It's always fun to watch those guys nonetheless. I mean, Mitch Tinsley last year was on a per highlight basis. You put his highlights up with anybody, and the highlights were incredible for him. My last question for you, Dan, is as we're in this doldrums period of the NFL offseason calendar, we've gotten through the offseason program, but there's still unanswered questions for every team in the NFL. As you're thinking about training camp and you're planning your own content, right? What's the biggest question that you're looking for the answer for as the Bengals will arrive in training camp in July?
I think we've covered a couple of them. I think linebacker still has to be the biggest question just because of their overall track record last year and the fact that they didn't add anybody significant at the position. So I think that naturally is number one. I would say offensive line depth would be number 2. I love the starting 5. Those guys barely missed a snap last year. It's hard to do that 2 years in a row. So at some point, somebody else is probably going to have to play. I like the 2 guys that they drafted. Hopefully Connor Lew is, good to go at the beginning of training camp, and we can see if he can be the backup center, and maybe Brian Parker can be kind of the swing backup guard. I do think Cody Ford looks a lot lighter this camp than he did last camp. I think it's a contract year for him. He knows he didn't play very well last year. I think the Bengals think that, if he's at his best playing weight, he can be at least a competent backup tackle, emergency tackle. So hopefully that would be the case. But, you'd still have to rank that as one of the biggest question marks just because we're so dependent right now on those starting 5 guys that if one of them goes down, or God forbid more than one, now you start to wonder, okay, can this offense continue to click without those 5 guys that played so well together toward the tail end of last year?
You can find Dan's 5 observations and his coverage of the Cincinnati Bearcats and the Cincinnati Bengals at Dan_Hoard on Twitter, his awesome Bengals Booth podcast that I've mentioned as well. Dan, we always appreciate the time, the insight, very generous of you. And you're the genesis of this podcast as well. So the generosity knows no bounds over the years. And until next time, that's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Thanks for listening. Hoo day, and have a good one.